It's funny. I was asking Vanessa right before I pressed record if there's anything we should go over before we start. And she kind of raised an eyebrow. Like, are you kidding me?
Acting like we don't know how to do this shit.
Come on now. Who are you talking to?
Who are you talking to?
I know. Well, for those of you who may not know, the lovely, talented, brilliant Miss Vanessa Bennett. Do you do Bennett Kim? I don't even know. Just Bennett.
No, Logan's Bennett Kim. But I mean, I think legally I'm Bennett Kim, but I'm not changing.
I said something about like, I'm like laughing like an old man as I say this because of how funny. But those of you who don't know, and we'll get into it, Vanessa is moving to, I started to say a plantation. Can you tell I have energy around this move?
What is happening?
What is it? A compound, not a plantation.
A country that I'm moving
She's
to another
moving
country.
to another country where there's going to be several, there's a few houses on the property. And so I was like, what did I call it? Like the Kim commune or something, just to like get you all fired up. And you're like, excuse me. It's like, yeah.
The Bennett Kim compound?
I thought it would be funny. But anyway.
Not funny today.
But deep breath on the comedy. Hello, Vanessa. Thanks so much
Dené.
for joining me on What's My 100%. I'm really excited to get to sit down with you. It feels like nothing's official until, we've stepped into the space together. But I feel like so many people have been asking me how you're doing, what's going on with you. We're recording this in April and in January.
It's March 31st.
Yeah.
That's how you roll.
Touche. We are approaching April as we record this, and I feel like everyone knows, but maybe just in case anyone doesn't know, in January we had a series of devastating fires in the city of Los Angeles, and my dear friends and family, Vanessa and John and Logan, lost their beautiful home in the fires. And I feel like we haven't really sat down to talk since. So I thought we should and just give everybody a little check-in. So first of all, how are you doing, my love?
Oh, it's been a wild start to the year. Definitely not anything that I would have predicted. It was not on my, as I've heard it called, it was not on my 2025 bingo sheet. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting this morning. I have a group thread with a couple other friends of mine who lost their homes. And, a couple of the Facebook groups that I've been on for years. There's one called Beautiful Altadena. And somebody posted something this morning. It was a picture from one of the churches. So Altadena has a really big church community. It's one of the oldest Black communities in LA, and home to a lot of churches, right? And it's part of like what makes Altadena. Anyway, there's one church on Lake, and somebody had posted a picture of the screen outside where they changed the little words or whatever, and it said, Altadena strong, we will rebuild, and then it said WTF firefighters. And I was like, oh, snap. So I'm going to be really honest for a second and say that it's been interesting to watch myself and my community members go from a place of shock. I mean, we're still in sadness, but shock and grieving, moving to a place of like anger, right? Frustration. And I've talked to a few community members who have lost their homes, who are in this weird state of, I know that I should be grateful. Everybody is always so grateful for the fire department and the first responders. And there's all these banners everywhere, like, thank you for your service. Thank you for your, and there's been this like unspoken thing with a lot of us that have been like, I feel weird saying that I don't feel that way. Right. And I don't know how to like grapple with that, because you almost feel like there's something wrong with you, or you're bad, or it's like shameful to not feel that. Right. But anyway, long story short, to say that I was saying to these girls this morning, I was like, it looks like people in the community are starting to edge into that feeling now, like this feeling of anger and this feeling of like, what the fuck, like what happened, right? I'm just starting to see that more and more. I actually feel like I've kind of moved through that. I think I've really, channeled it a lot, like really tried to use this energy as like a channel for creating things and giving back and doing what I can for my physical community, but my online community. But anyway, that wasn't really an answer to your question. It was just something that happened this morning that I thought was interesting, which was like this collective shift from one space, one emotional space into another, and kind of being witness to that, you know?
It's interesting. I feel like I watched you channel into that energy from the moment the fires happened, where you really stepped into service and into being present for your people and your community. As I don't know, like I feel like you're always that person that I'm like, you want Vanessa in a crisis. You know, like I'm like, when it goes down and the zombie apocalypse happens, I'll like take my child to you and be like, you take him. I feel like you got this.
When it comes to the zombie apocalypse, I'm out. I tap out. Once my glasses break, I'm screwed anyway. So just take me now.
But you know, all kidding aside, I do feel like you sort of instinctually just gathered up everyone and really channeled the energy of what was a really chaotic time into how am I going to like make sure everybody has some sense of stability. And do you feel like that was just sort of like the survival, the coping strategy? Was it something that you consciously thought about or drew from, or just like what kind of took over you?
I don't know. I mean, I think it probably was survival only in that I don't even really remember or know where it came from. Like, I don't know if I even have the memory, right? I mean, I know that the morning that I found out the house was gone, probably within an hour, I was on Airbnb getting a big house for a bunch of families who had all lost their, you know, homes, and the kids were all close. And so I wanted to get everybody together. I guess it was more like, making sure that I took the reins. People were all over in a state of just any state that you can imagine, right? And I guess I thought like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to step in and be the one that drives the ship, because I know that good old parentified child, I'm always good at being the one to drive the ship. But I think I needed it too. And I think I knew that. I think on some level I knew that I needed to be with other people who had had a similar experience, that I think I knew we all needed to like be removed, be together, sort this out. The kids needed each other. So I don't know, maybe there was just something in me that just knew like, this is what we have to do. This is what's best for us. And it just kind of, I let it take over.
Yeah. I feel like so many people have said to me, or I don't know, like it's interesting that I asked you how you were doing, and this isn't like the therapist in me like challenging that, but maybe just like being curious, because a little bit there's a way that sometimes we process the world similarly, and I'll say why I'm saying this, but it can be almost like a delayed response to difficult emotions, I think, that we both have. And like I've watched John, your partner, like from the jump, get into the space of like, here's the meaning, here's how I like understand this, here's how I'm like, this is going to be like the best thing that ever happened, where I'm like, damn, John, this is like, okay, that's amazing. And I feel like I haven't, even as someone who, you know, feels pretty close to you, I haven't felt a large sense, except you came to my neck of the woods and had some time by yourself. And so that's why I was thinking maybe it was a little bit of a delayed response, where I feel like I actually got a little perspective on how you maybe have been actually feeling. Whereas I feel like in so many ways there was just I just sort of, not like robotic, but I just felt like you in task mode every time I would be around you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think that when something huge like this happens, and whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's like losing somebody you love, whether it's like, you know, any kind of like major loss, I think we do go in I would say a lot of us go into task mode. Some of us go into shutdown mode. Some of us go into task mode. I've definitely been watching some of the couples that I've been around and been with, and noticing who goes into what mode, right? And some of them definitely go into shutdown mode, which I think is hard when on the opposite side of that, you're the doer and the go into task mode. But I think it's like a natural, I don't know, maybe it's a mother thing too, right? Like as a mom, like ain't no one got time to sit around. Like, you got to get this shit figured out. I got to get my kid a roof over her head. I got to get her clothes. I got to, you know, make sure she's okay. And then when all of that is said and done, then I can take a breath and check in and say, how am I, you know? And I think that was a lot of also where I went, was like, no, I got to make sure that Logan is okay and that she's got everything she needs and we're stable and all these things. But Yeah, I think maybe it was a delay. I know those first few weeks. I mean, one of the reasons, again, maybe intuitively, I knew that I needed to be in a house, a little chaotic, but a house with other people who had had the same experience, was because throughout those first couple weeks, we were all like dipping in and out of feeling and different feelings. And it was nice because we didn't have to put on a front for anybody, you know, like we were all in it. So we would be in the middle of having a conversation about what we're making for dinner. And then somebody would burst into tears because they realized they had lost X, Y, and Z. And then we would all stop and we would kind of hold that space. And then they would, and we would keep making dinner, you know, and that was a lot of the experience for that first, like probably month. It was just that.
Yeah. I feel like it does become such a beautiful reminder of why we need each other and why we aren't really meant to do these things alone. Because I was thinking, as you were saying, like, I don't know if it's like the mom or whatever in me. And I was thinking about when I was on the island of Hawaii, when Maui was on fire, and I had a very different response. I feel like if most of the time I'm pretty like, you know, things work out, like it's whatever. Like there was something about being on an island with my child and not feeling like I was going to be able to know how to protect him if things weren't okay, that I freaked the fuck. Like I was not okay. And like luckily my mother is very like you in a crisis and was like, here's how we're going to handle it, when I was a little bit freaking out. But yeah, I think when we have the option sometimes of one person being the person who's holding things together, then it gives us a little bit of room to feel the big emotions. Whereas if we don't have that, you know, then it's like, I don't have a choice. I just kind of have to be in survival. And I guess that's how we hold one another down in those moments, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting, right? Like you were talking about John kind of going into that mode very quickly of like meaning making. And actually recently his therapist, like 2 weeks ago, was like, can I ask you a question? Do you think there's any like bypassing happening? Because I just feel like you really haven't felt a lot, you know, about this. And look, everybody processes differently. We know this, right? There's no right way to grieve. There's no right way to go through or handle something like this. I have seen John break down once, and it was a really bad breakdown. Bad, that's not the right word, but big breakdown. And he was even like, I don't know. He came to me after like, do you think I am? And all of a sudden he's thinking like, am I? Should I be feeling more? And I'm like, I don't know. I just think you should be feeling what you're feeling, you know, just be with yourself and let it move and shift as it will. And maybe try not to have so much control over it. You know?
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because I was thinking, and I had this revelation, I guess. So for those of you who don't know, John and Vanessa are moving to Costa Rica in a few months. And I think that I've sort of been, not even just around like the possibility of this move, but several of the changes that have occurred in our friendship. I think, you know, certainly like our podcast ending, you getting married, and like the shifts that brought forward, even though, you know, you guys have lived together for a long time, but there were a lot of things that were like shifting in our dynamic that I don't want to say like I was in denial of, but I think that there's a way that I process the world that is sort of like, I'm not feeling anything about this. Like, I don't feel any feelings. Like, it is what it is. Change is like the inevitable thing. And like, I will be very similar to what you're describing with John, like really quick to go to the meaning making. And something happened to me when you told me that like it was done and you were getting the house. Vanessa, and I know I texted you. I was like, I am not okay. But I literally...
Everybody listen to this. She's admitting that she has feelings right here. You're hearing it live.
I'm like, oh God, I feel really uncomfortable. I'm like, is it hot in here? But I had like a full, like, could not stop crying to the point where my kid was like, Mommy, are you okay? Like, I kept like, but it was, and it's coming. Like, I can feel it again. But it was just the like, no matter what has happened in my life over the last several years, like I remember I had a baby and my kid's dad was like, I booked this job and it's a really big job and I gotta go. Would that be okay? And I was like I needed to get home from the hospital. And I was like, okay, Vanessa, could you come get me? And you like brought my baby home from the hospital. I did not invite you on to sit here and cry. But you stayed with me while I was in like the most destabilizing moment ever of like, oh, I guess I'm a mom now. There's this child, and you just like walked me through all that. And then my marriage ended, and it was like reflexively, okay, go to Vanessa and she will like hold you down. And there was something about like the recognition of like, oh, she's leaving, where it's so big right now. I'm feeling it again, that my psyche was like overwhelmed with the grief. And it was like I was feeling all of these different experiences that I know for sure I have not let myself feel over the last few years. And yeah, it just like felt like a lot of different things intertwined in the grief of you leaving. So I'm saying all this to say, I think a lot of times we'll talk about people spiritually bypassing or the way that they're processing whatever it is. But if you would have asked me in any of these instances, even like when our friend Darren passed away, like I think there was a way that like I started to feel that coming up as I realized you were leaving in a way that was like really hard. And I think any of those times I would have been like, no, I'm genuinely okay. Like I genuinely, and I think grief hits us when it's time for it to hit us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it, I think it's, it also comes like disguised as different things. It comes packaged as different things. It'll hit you in random places and times, and sometimes you're like, what is this about? Right. And then you're like, oh, it's about that. And I think that's the interesting thing about grief, is that it's amorphous. Is that the word I'm thinking of? Like there's no shape to it. You can't put your finger on it. I think like you were saying about how we process the world similarly. I mean, I think we were jokingly talking the other day about like both of us in our Libra moons and how I can be a little aloof and a little perceived as unfeeling.
Dead inside.
Dead inside.
The phrase you're looking for.
Avoidant, if you will. But there's a survival strategy in that, and it's something you have to kind of adopt. I feel like I remember the moment when I was sitting on the couch in Santa Ana at the big Airbnb that I'd gotten for the 3 families. And John had already been talking about moving. I mean, literally like the next day, he's like, let's move to Santa Barbara. Let's move to and I'm like, you need to shut up. Like there was a lot of times where I was like, I'm going to punch you if you do not stop like telling me what we're going to do tomorrow when I just lost my fucking house yesterday. But there was a moment where the kids were all sleeping, and the 3 kind of couples were all sitting up, and we were talking, and that came up again. I don't remember what it was. I actually think kind of random, but for whatever reason. So I have like a security camera system, right? And it's hooked to my phone. And we have a house in the mountains here, right? So it's all one app. So I have the house in the mountains, kind of those cameras hooked up, but I also used to have the cameras at my house in Altadena in the same platform, right? And I have a kid, so I have like her camera. Anyway, I got like a notification, from the Mountain House one, and I opened the app, and on the main screen, before you click into the individual camera, is like a screenshot that stays there of whatever the last time you opened that camera was. So on my app is a screenshot, and I still have it, and I like refuse to touch it, of my daughter in bed sleeping the night that the fires happened, but before I went in to wake her up to have her leave. And we were talking about community, whatever. And I saw this picture and I just fucking lost it. And I remember saying like, I don't want to leave my people. I don't want to leave my community. Like that, I think has been the hardest part of this, is it feels like it was taken away. Like it wasn't something that I chose. Like I didn't choose to leave. I feel like I'm choosing to go to Costa Rica, but in a way, I almost feel like I'm not. Like I really kind of feel like this decision was like made for me. And yeah, I can go to the place of meaning making, but also there's that little kid in all of us that wants to like kick and hold the door frame and be like, no, like I don't want to do this. I don't want to leave, I don't want to leave my people. And so there's this kind of like inner battle, I think, that's been happening since the moment of the fires, honestly, in that area.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting, even as you say that, I think when I was in my little girl kicking and screaming about you leaving, that I had the sense of like, because again, I do shift to the like, what is this meant to teach me. And I think there's been a way that you have been so lovingly patient with my lack of feelings, I think, because on so many levels you understand. But that also, like, yeah, like I feel like there was no forced, like, you're kind of being dead inside and maybe act like you're feeling about this, but also that it just brought like home, like, and this is what's best for Vanessa right now. And loving her means you want her to be happy, and you want, even if it's going to be hard and you're going to miss her and you're going to feel like she's in another friggin' country, that love means that I want you to be liberated and I want you to feel free, right? And so it was just like, walk that walk, girl. Yeah.
It is a walk in that walk. I feel like part of it is too, and I'm not saying I'm giving permission to people or telling anybody to like pack up their life and move countries necessarily, but there is something in this where I do feel like, and people have said as much to me, but in different ways, like there's something very like permission giving, I think, in this process. As people have watched us and they've said, like, people have actually literally said, I'm not jealous that your house burned down, but I am kind of jealous that you get to pack up and go somewhere else, right? And my permission giving point in this is to say, like, we actually can do any of this shit. Like, we can go where we want to go. We can do what we want to do. People are like, no, I have kids. I have a partner. I have a house. I have a brick and mortar. I've got it, right? We'll always like find reasons why we can't change our life or do something that feels like, holy shit, that's scary, but maybe it's something we've always wanted to do, or I'm just going to do this thing that feels really hard because I know it's going to be like a crazy adventure, whatever that is, right? And I do hope that maybe in this experience for me, there's a little bit of permission giving to all of us, like to you, to other friends, that like, fuck it.
Are you giving me permission to move to Costa Rica? Because I tried, and my kid's dad is like not about that life.
We'll keep working on him.
Please move to Costa Rica.
We'll keep working on him.
I've said please. Yes, but I think there's something in what you're saying that does become a reminder that, I think the things that we find a sense of stability in are often illusions. And I think I will always talk about, if you are so certain that like you are in control, like go to the ocean and make it stop, right? Like get in there. Mother Nature is one of those things that will make so clear to us the level of insignificance that we are and that we hold. And I think it was so fascinating to be in LA in a time where, there was just so much happening that was like the great equalizer of like, no matter who you are, no matter the resources that you have, sometimes Mother Nature decides that none of this is promised for any of us, right? And if that is always the truth, then what kind of life do I want to live, right?
I think that's a big aha that I've had, but also that I'm watching other people have. And I keep saying this idea of our generation in particular. I think that the generation before us, like I think the boomers had a sense of maybe stability, or like they had some kind of guarantee that life was going to look a certain way, and they were going to retire by a certain age, and they could buy a house by a certain age with a certain amount of income, and they could raise a family on one income, and all these things, right? That, I mean, obviously I'm generalizing, not everybody experienced that, but generationally many did. And I think that one of the conversations I've had over and over again about our generations, whether we're talking like Gen X, millennials, is this like, we got to stop pretending that that's our life. It's not, right? Like climate change has really altered the way that we live, no matter where you live. I don't care if you're in California or not, right? And listen, this was not fully climate change. This was mostly man-made, right? And I won't say anything else because there will be a lawsuit that's happening.
Please don't say. Jesus, I don't even know what I'm doing.
But it's mostly man-made, and obviously all the things had to be lined up perfectly for it to happen. But regardless, I do think that there is a reckoning that our generation has to have around what we feel we were promised, what we expect or think life should look like, and then like the reality of I don't know, where Earth is in this moment, right? And I feel like at a macro level, that's also been something that's really come out of this experience.
Oof. Well, so many things there. I'm like, which to dive into going deeper on, because I think there's something in what is shifting. And yes, there are the aspects of dominance and structures of dominance and how we have felt like we can sort of be in a dominant stance over Mother Nature. I was just talking to someone the other day about all of the plants and ways that we have sort of created this city, as much as we both love LA, but that is filled with plants that are not indigenous to this
and
environment.
And then add to the fires. Yep.
And that at some point there is, and I think in a lot of cases was, a reckoning with some of those elements. And I think, you know, people who are indigenous to this area have been, you know, attempting to shout from the rooftops for quite some time, that there's a lot about the ways that we are interacting with nature that we're at some point going to have a reckoning, right? And I think those can be really difficult things to say in the midst of so much pain and loss. And I think that is where, if we don't attempt to draw meaning, then we miss the point of some of these moments. The other thing, in terms of like how the world is shifting, I was, my kid had a birthday party this weekend, and they were like, and it was just the two boys. So you're like, why am I just hearing about this? But I was talking to the two moms, and they were like talking about schools and getting into schools and what's going to be prioritized. And I'm thinking in my head, none of these things are going to matter because in 5 years from now, the world is going to look so different that we can't even like wrap our heads around how different all of this is going to be, right? That artificial intelligence is going to change the way that our children interact with education, the ways that they are, like the types of jobs that are going to be available or what they're going to do in those jobs. And I don't know. I think with what you're saying, there is an opportunity, if we choose to see it this way, to really completely reconfigure how we choose to live our lives. And I feel like you and John are sort of like in the living experience of that right now, you know?
Yeah, even in like the realization, right? I had this plan and this idea that Logan was going to go to this school, and it was a local school, and it was a French immersion program. And not that French was necessarily our first choice, but it was, you know, our local school, and I was excited for it. We were all getting ready, and then obviously that's changed, right? And now she's going to be in this school in Costa Rica, which is, I mean, they're literally called a community school. I mean, they put so much emphasis on community building, and they're really engaged with the local community, and it's Spanish bilingual, right? And even in that, it's like, in 10 years time, this might be just a distant memory for her. But I want to, I suppose, equip her with as many of the tools that I feel like are not actually going to get erased by AI, right? Like community building and respect for other cultures and open-mindedness and flexibility and, you know, resourcefulness and all of these things that, if I'm being honest, we had talked about this the other day when we were together. Like, I'm kind of sitting back and I'm watching my kid and I'm going, oh shit, man. The comforts that you have lived in for your 5 years on this planet are really creating some stuff that I can see being problems to untangle later on. And I don't love actively or consciously participating in the creation of that, right? And in a weird way, I almost feel like, for the sake of her, this has happened even to maybe help pull some of those threads.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because I think as parents, it can be tough to know how to balance the level of, and this is something we were talking about, like what is accessible to us and has been accessible so instantly to our children, that is just not really teaching them how to thrive in a lot of ways and be resourceful. And I think we were talking about like how much, like, if you look at like the Amazon and like the instant gratification of like, I want something and it's here tomorrow, that our children have just had like normalized. And that we were talking about, like, it's not about if you can have it, it's about, have you worked to, you know, to save for this and to have some value around what this thing is. And I think there's so much of, all of us collectively have just lost our sense of valuing anything, really. I mean, it's just like the earth that we're inhabiting, but also like the resources are limited, you know?
Well, and like frustration tolerance, right? Like none of us have frustration tolerance anymore. Even those of us who were raised with it, it's been stripped away by all of these more modern conveniences, you know? And I was actually just sitting last night with John, and I'm starting to kind of go through all the things and the lists and everything I need to get done for this move and, you know, where we're going to be. There is no Amazon. You know, the closest like store is an hour away. I mean, there's like the little markets for food, but there's no store where I can get the average thing that I think I need, right? And I said to John last night, I need you, just like I'm doing with mine and Logan's stuff, I need you to sit, open your cabinets up, and in your mind, I need you to think forward 6 months' time. What is it that you think you might need in the next 6 months that you do not have in your possession right now? Because if it's something you really need, you better fucking order it. Because otherwise you're not going to have it, right? And partly that's a good thing, right? And partly it really makes you think about like, what do I need versus like, what do I just, is it like an itch that I scratch just because I can? And I'm actually, as hard as it's going to be, I'm kind of excited even for myself to have to sit with that discomfort of like, do I really need this thing? Or is it just because I've grown accustomed to just getting everything I want at the drop of a hat?
And there's an adaptability that we start to understand is accessible to us. And I stopped using Amazon when the world was using it, but I just haven't gone back because it's like, I actually don't want to be in support of something that I think, you know, let me just stop there. I'm
picking up what you're putting down.
Let me just, and I think that there's all kinds of ways that there are beautiful things about like downsizing our lives. And I think, you know, I know you would have to be feeling that, but I think that that's, you know, as much as like you were saying before, we don't ever want to have the choice taken away from us. And that's the difficult aspect. I think there is just so much value on stuff that I have really, I think partly by watching everything that you guys have been through, you know, like how much is that like what I want to teach my child, but really myself in terms of values, right? Like that, like the stuff is anything more than that, right?
It has been hard to lose my clothes as a Taurus.
I mean, you're a lot more into fashion than I
as a Taurus. So. I have to say that yesterday when I got out of the car with a couple friends and realized that we have an event again, like we're going to see each other next weekend, and the 3 out of 4 of us had all lost our homes. And we all got out of the car and we jokingly were like, okay, so, you know, we'll see you next Saturday. And then we were all like, we'll be in the same clothes because we have nothing else to wear to go out with, right? And we all just kind of like laughed about it because you have to. I mean, it's like, okay, haha, we're all in this together. Like nobody will judge anybody that we'll all be in the same clothes next week that we're in today.
I'm like, well, I tell you could come to my closet, but first of all, I don't think you'd want anything in here, but also I don't think it would fit you. But I mean, and it's one of those moments where it's like the little things. But I think again, then things start to be sacred. Like I remember there was this jacket that you had left at my house and you'd forgotten about, and I brought it to you and you just started crying and you were like, I'd forgotten this jacket. But it's like, you know, we have so much stuff a lot of times that the things that we have aren't really sacred. They just become things, you know, whereas if we don't have as much, I think we really value the things that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that even goes back to what you were saying about like people and community. I think that sometimes people, for whatever reason, I think sometimes even our relationships or people in our lives can become disposable. Feels like maybe too big of a word, but it is a similar kind of feeling, right? Like that Amazon gives us with stuff is that people also become a little expendable. Maybe that's the word. And as much as I remember leading a group in our community, like the first week that I was back after the fires, I think it was like maybe 3 weeks after. And I remember saying to them, one of the things I'm sitting with right now is I feel like for the last couple of years I've been, and not just me, other people too, have been community is everything. We have to get back to community. It's so important. People, you know, and I said, and I really feel like what these fires are doing is actually asking me like to walk my walk and not just talk my talk. Because I feel like we can all talk about the importance of community, but what does that actually mean in action is very different. And as somebody who is on this kind of lifelong mission to break down our codependent ways of relating to one another. I think that sometimes there's a fine line there, you know, and that people even struggle with. They ask me about in therapy, they ask me about like in the context of the work that you and I do, which is like, so where does hyper independence end? And like, where does codependency begin? You know, some of these questions we get like, oh, you're just saying we don't need anybody. And I really feel like this experience has forced me to, in a tangible felt sense, have to actually work out some of those questions for myself. And, you know, some of the ways that I've had to show up for people that weren't convenient for me. And I had to really sit with, okay, like maybe a year ago, you would have said something about this experience that you actually in this moment, tangibly, like that's not the truth. Like this is what community looks like.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes it is like putting your own fucking ego aside and doing something that's inconvenient for you because this person needs it. Right. And that's part of being in community. And so even in that, like, it's forcing me to get in and say like, okay, conceptualizing is one thing, like doing is another. And I don't know, it's making me kind of like dig in, I guess, like into those layers, you know?
Yeah. And it's interesting because you and I were having a little bit of this conversation the other day. And I think that so much of our awareness or how we approach whatever the thing is has to come from an internally motivated place.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean when I say that is I think what ends up happening a lot of times when we're in the conversation around community or hyper individualism or even like how people are showing up in a moment that they shouldn't be. And let's take like, you know, the polarization in our country and like some of the hot and button issues that have come up. What I think a lot of times people experience as community where I feel like it's codependent is here is how you need to be showing up in community. Here is how you need to be changing the way that you are showing up. And we were talking about that Martin Luther King quote where he says you have very little moral standing when people can feel the underlying level of contempt that you hold for them, right? And so I think there's a way that what is, you know, beautiful. And I think you're right. I think there's this thing of like, we can take people for granted. And a lot of times it's because we have so much access to people. If you look at these dating apps and how we're just like swiping on people like they're not human beings anymore, we really take for granted what a privilege it is to have people around us and be able to go on dates with people and all of these different things. But I think the path to get to that space of really valuing one another is not through coercion or like demand. It becomes some sort of an internal reckoning. I think sometimes through having the felt experience of loss, you know?
Yeah. And I think that even like one of the things I've talked about a lot, you know, you've heard me say in this whole experience has been this change in my relationship with receiving, right? As the kind of the person who has always been the like, it's fine, I got it, I don't need it, don't worry about it, I'll handle it kind of person, to be in a state where I actually couldn't do that, right? Because no, I don't have it and I can't handle it. And yes, I will happily accept that thing, whether it's a gift of time or a gift of money or a gift of service, like whatever, you know, and I had to say yes. And even in that, like really sitting with the idea of service, how do I say this? Like, I guess I'm reevaluating the way that like my hyper independence has always showed up as don't worry, I've got it. And like that is somehow me taking care of the other person, right? It's that whole like I'm a burden that so many people struggle with. And actually starting to, again, not just conceptually, but really understand at a visceral level that somebody serving you is actually really filling them up.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And by me denying them that, that's actually not me being in relationship with them. And so even that has been like something I'm working through or working with, I guess, when it comes to this idea of community, like being of service in community. Right. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all so hard because I think that it's the space of like, how do I, first of all, hold myself and others with so much grace, but then also get really clear about like, what is my authentic desire? What is the message I'm telling myself about what something means, whether it's giving or receiving? And can I challenge what's historic about this? And if sometimes there's a pain point there, can I don't know, challenge myself to do a little bit of reconfiguring around if that's still serving me to hold on to it that way.
Yeah. And really like questioning the motivation, right? Like this gut response, this like, maybe not gut, but trigger response really to say, oh, don't worry about it, or I got it. Like to really slow down enough to question the motivation behind that. Right.
Yeah.
I think something that I think that's just in general something that's happened is like the slowing down and the forcing you to look at the motivation for so much has come out of these fires, I think.
Well, let me ask you about you and this next iteration of Vanessa and what you feel like has been just any sort of awareness around like what you have felt hungry for, what you're, I think this can be an interesting, like, what are you putting down after everything that you've moved through in the last few months that like, I just really don't care about that anymore, like any of that energy?
Yeah. I mean, I think partly it's what I was saying about receptivity, right? I think partly it's been a real, again, kind of embodied experience of not, how do I word this? Like not pushing or forcing, but like allowing. So it's been, again, something conceptually I've understood and talked about for a long time, but maybe not like in a felt embodied way understood, which is this idea of like, if it feels too hard, it's probably not your path. And that's not to say we don't work hard, because obviously we know I'm a hard worker, right? And that's also instilled in me. But it is getting familiar with what the difference is between like, I want this thing and I'm going to work hard to make this thing happen versus actual like walls and things that are being put up in your path that you're just not paying attention to, right? And continuing to try to like push through instead of just acknowledging and just being like, that's fine. It's not a big deal. Just reroute, right? Why am I so fucking committed to making this one path the way to do it or the way to do this thing, right? So I think it's been a little bit of that, like putting down, maybe putting down some of the effort that I think I always approached everything with. And I think that even shows up even in my relationships. Like, I don't want to work so hard anymore in my relationships, you know, and it's not to say that relationships aren't work. Of course they are. I do believe that. It will always be easier when John and I get in a fight for me to go to my go-to tactics and to shut down and to get defensive and to pull in and to do all the things that I'm used to doing, right? So it's going to always be harder to actually do the things I know I need to do and should be doing to be the highest version of myself. So don't mistake me when I'm saying it's not hard work, because it is. But again, that feels different than like forcing something, right? And I think my world has gotten smaller and bigger at the same time. Like the people that I really care about are the people I really care about. And again, I'm not going to work so hard, right? To be loved and to be love. It's just not worth it to me anymore, because it just feels false anyway. And also like, and I guess I probably put this down a long time ago, but like not expecting other people to do so much work either. I think it's like a lot of us just letting go of this idea that we have to fucking hustle for our belonging, right? Be worthy of all the things we have, including people.
I feel like you felt when you're like, you heard it here, folks. She has feelings. I'm like, you heard her say it. You don't have to work so hard. And that's beautiful to hear, because I feel like, you know, as someone who loves you, I'm like, I like the idea of you just having more ease. Then, I don't know. I know that you are one of those people that's just because you carry it so well doesn't mean it's not heavy people, you know? And I think that's been a lot of, my wish for you is just some of that ease and that flow and trust. And I feel that. I feel like there's aspects of you that feel different in that way, you know?
Yeah. I'm just not really like willing to like hold things that aren't mine anymore and like force things that just don't feel aligned anymore. And again, I know people are going to hear that, and inevitably somebody's going to say like, well, that, you know, you should work hard. It's like, listen,
Why? Why
I am
should we work
I am
hard?
I am like the quintessential raised in the family of pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of, mentality. I'm a fucking hard worker, and I've been a hard worker my whole life, and that is nothing I'll ever doubt myself on. And even in saying that, it doesn't have to be so hard, and I think that is something that all of us could really stand to swallow that medicine a little bit, which is like, stop fucking fighting so hard. Stop trying so hard to get everything. Just like let things come to you that are going to come to you, and put your effort and attention into the things that feel good and joyful and like they bring ease, and stop putting so much of your energy and attention into things that don't. And that doesn't mean that you can, like, let's say, oh, I have this, tricky relationship with, like, let's say a parent, and it's like, but I don't want to cut them out, right? And it doesn't mean that you just like stop trying. I'm not saying that, but like start looking at the way that you are adding to your own struggle. You are adding, not them. The way that you are showing up is causing more struggle and strain than there needs to be, right? Like that is part of this that like we really need to take ownership of, is like, I'm adding to the struggle in my life. And a lot of times it's not the other person, it's me.
Yeah. I think about how John says and said early on, resist nothing. And I think so often, hard work to me is very different than resistance. I think there's a way that we can like meet the universe halfway and be in the like, I control what's within my control, but the resisting what is, the resisting who people are, that is a very different animal. And that's right. I don't actually experience it as changing things, but it certainly is where we waste a lot of our energetic output from my perspective.
Yeah. And it feels really cozy and comfortable to be in that like victim, this is happening to me state. And I get that. And also like, how's that feeling?
I was about to say, I don't know if it feels cozy and comfortable. It might feel like the devil I know.
But that's even going back to me and John fighting, right? It's like in the beginning, it feels cozy and comfortable for me to do the things that I know how to do, but I know long-term are not serving my higher self or the higher self of this relationship, right? Like the consciousness of this relationship still feels better. Still feels better for me to be like, fuck you, you're wrong, I'm right, and like pull in. But so it's like that idea, like there's a difference between simple and easy,
That
it's not easy, but
it's not simple. Easy, but it is simple. That's real. So I'm going to pick a card from this deck. Those of you who are watching.
I had that deck.
Oh, well, we'll have to get you another one. I'm happy to give you some metaphysical.
My response to everything these days, I had that.
Oh, yeah.
I used to have that.
I didn't know you had this one, or I would have replaced it.
All my Kim Cran stuff. So sad. Logan had books from her. I loved her books, her children's books, and all of her decks that I had.
Shout out to Kim Krantz.
Yeah, Pacifica.
Which is why I felt like I should pull the archetype deck. And I think, something I'm really excited about in terms of what you're doing is I feel like I've just watched you in a way that has made me feel so moved and proud, really, taking all of what I feel like I've been watching you feel for a few years around like all of the aspects of depth that we love so much and the conversations that we feel so passionate about having. How do we start to support others in expanding these conversations and making this a more normalized part of our cultural vernacular? And I don't know how much you want to talk about it. You can come back and talk about it later because you have a lot of things that are coming later this year. So I feel like we'll talk about a lot of that more, but just the way that you're channeling some of that into purpose right now has been really beautiful to witness, babe.
I always said thank you. And I always said that. I remember a long time, maybe it was last year actually in May when we were in New York for your book launch. And I remember you asking me something about, I don't remember exactly what it was, but something about like, well, what do you want, or what do you see yourself as, or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was because I think I'd had 2 margaritas by that point. But I remember saying something about, and this is not from the ego sense because I could never and would never even begin to assume that I'm in the same stratosphere as Marianne Woodman, R.I.P. But this idea of like being like the modern day, right? Like bringing this idea and this vernacular, like you were saying, this way of living and being kind of to the modern, the kind of average person, the lay person, if you will. And I think getting caught up in all of the ego stuff that our culture right now makes it very easy to get caught up in. I have not really been on social media at all since the fires, and it's never felt fucking better, if I'm being honest. I know I have to, and I'll be back, guys, but I'm working out my relationship with it. But even just in that energetic clearing of like, I don't actually care what anybody else is doing. I don't care. I don't care what other people are saying. I don't care what other people are doing. Like, I'm so over being in the soup of it all. But in that has been a lot of space to be like, okay, what do I want to create? What is it that I feel like I can bring to the table? And it's not about what somebody else is or isn't doing. It's just about me, you know?
And I think that's beautiful because, you know, while deep bows to Marion Woodman, we are so grateful for her. I think it is like, you know, you said to pretend I'm even in the same stratosphere. You're in your own stratosphere. You are the Vanessa with your own, you know, perspective on the evolution of all of these frameworks. And so I think we hold with so much reverence those we've been inspired by. And then it's like, how do we integrate our particular brand of magic into what we've learned, right? So the card that we pulled was the Medallion card. And I'm going to read the description and you're going to tell me what it brings up for you. Okay? Interesting. Oh, I feel like it brought up something.
Do you have your glasses?
I don't, of course.
I'm not there to read it for you today.
Some things never change. Oh, that's tickled me. It's all right. I'll squint. The medallion, the amulet, the talisman, the heirloom. The passing on of sacred objects is an ancient ritual within families, between lovers, and in tribes across the globe. We gift jewels, treasures, keepsakes, and mementos of all kinds, some of great material value, others that hold emotional resonance, and still others with both. Yet, when these gifts are bestowed upon us, it is important to recognize that they may bind us to an unspoken agreement or promise. When the medallion card appears, be aware of how the objects you hold dear may be embedded with unconscious energy or expectations. Materials hold consciousness, and it's time to reconcile the vibration of the objects around you. What do you covet and collect? Why? Is there an object you have held onto for years that you are ready to release? Perhaps it is time to reach for the medallion that aligns with your deepest values. So when in light, upholding tradition, protecting and honoring. When dark, burdensome, inheritance, habituation, go deeper, ancient Egyptian amulets. What does that bring up for you right now, V? Your face.
My inner system right now is torn between wanting to tell Kim Kranz to fuck off.
I was wondering if that would feel a little irritating.
Since I have forcefully lost every single thing that I would have ever passed on to anyone. And that has been passed on to me, right? I guess probably what's happening for me right now is even just going back to what we've been talking about, which is this like conceptual understanding of it versus embodied understanding of it. And I think I'm in a conceptual place with that right now, but not quite an embodied place yet. I've never been a sentimental person, so I don't have too many things, but I do have some things. And I'm one to cull things down that I love and cherish. And so losing all of that has been hard. And yet this like idea of like, what is the talisman or the amulet that you want to have and you want to pass down. When I think of passing things down to like my daughter, I think like, again, going back to this conversation of what I hope Costa Rica can do for her. You know, I hope to pass down resilience, and I hope to pass down appreciation, and I hope to pass down reverence, and I hope to pass down, you know, things that you can't tangibly give. And yes, it's really sad to me that I won't be able to wear and then give down like my grandmother's jewelry and the things, you know, my doll that I've had since I was 3, my baby blanket, her baby stuff, like all of that stuff is gone. But just trying to, again, I guess like conceptually versus like tangibly feel into that difference. Like I know there's a difference. I'm just not quite there yet because I toggle between it.
Wow. I feel like I don't know what to say to you right now, except that I just feel a lot of pride, and that feels weird to say because you're not mine. Although you are mine. But I just have been like really proud of the way that I've watched you move through a time that I feel like would bring any of us to our knees, just with the immensity. You've had not only so much grace for those around you and holding where they are in the process, but yourself, and I don't know, there were like, if you think about what it is to, and this is a whole other conversation that we'll have another time, but what it is for, a mom to be in the midst of all of that and a child that is like, out of school, completely destabilized on you every second. And I just feel like, I don't know, I've been just really proud as a woman to watch the way that you have navigated with so much strength and grace, so much difficulty, babe. So deep bows to you.
Thank you.
And I know that this time will be a period in your life that is teaching you so much about who you are and what you're truly capable of. I mean, I know it already has, but I know that it will continue to. And as much as for me, it is really difficult. I'm really excited for this next chapter for all the three of you. And I mean, I'll be in Costa Rica a lot more.
Like, let's be real, it's still the four of us.
So that's, I was like, oh, we're going to be in Costa Rica. I'm like, yes, once a month at minimum, buddy. So there's that. But thank you for coming on and just giving everybody a little bit of an update on how you're doing.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Always. All right, my love. We'll
see you in the jungle.
Soon. Oh, with the, what are they? Scorpions.
The scorpions. Oh my God.
Oh my
God. Pray for me. That's the only thing.
Big breath on the scorpions, but get through that. We can do hard things.
We'll
get through this. Oh my God. All right, my love. I'll see you guys later.